Hello, Assalamu alaikum. This is Council Premier. Welcome to another Voices Tower Hamlets. This is the second part to Death of Bricklane, part 2. So with me today is Dr. Ahmedullah, who's a researcher and historian, but also an activist around Bricklane. He's seen a lot of the changes and observed a lot of the political movements. He was involved in a community plan many years ago for the Truman Brewery before it got bought up by a big landlord, and now they're proposing to turn it into a corporate offices and high-end retail shops. But the reason why I'm asking, having this to Dr. Ahmedullah, is obviously Bricklane is to the fore. Apparently there were demonstrations the other day about gentrification and social cleansing. And there's also been a report by the Runnymede Trust, which is an equality trust, talking about the gentrification. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ahmedullah. So Dr. Ahmedullah, just tell us about yourself and also a bit just your relationship to Bricklane, and what does Bricklane mean to you, kind of it.
Well, I came to this country in 1973 in March. I was about 10 years old. I lived in Newham in Plaistow, and since I came, Bricklane was always known as a Bengali area. If you go to Bricklane, you see a lot of Bengalis. You didn't see many Bengalis outside this area, and in Newham there were hardly any Bengalis those days, and for a long time this was the case. Yeah. Now, I think I first came to Bricklane in 1974 with my brother. There was a cinema hall called Nas Cinema Hall, and next to the Nas Cinema Hall there was a cafe. It wasn't a Bengali cafe, I think it was a Pakistani cafe, right? And there was a record shop, Indian record shop. I had samosa and tea, and really enjoyed eating samosa because my mom didn't used to make samosa at home. So after that, occasionally I would come here with my older brother. He would bring me, just walk around Bricklane. But it was from 1976, I think, when I started to come here more regularly. One of my friends, I used to go to school in Kennington, and one of my friends, when I was in the second year of senior school, secondary school, taught me how to play truant in a bunk school. So 3 of us bunked school, so they brought me to Bricklane.
But the relationship between the Bangladeshi or Bengali community before we were known as Bengali before independence is not a recent one. Like in the history books, it's like after the war everybody came over, but your research has shown that Bricklane and the surrounding area has had a 300-year relationship with Bengal, and also there's historical records of people from Bangladesh being here around that time. Do you want to?
Well, just to finish off, earlier time. So that's how I became familiar with Bricklane. But those days, Bricklane wasn't predominantly Bengali. But if you came to Bricklane, that's why you saw more Bengalis than anywhere else. So it felt like a Bengali area. There used to be a lot of Indians and Pakistani people in the area, then obviously Jewish and other people, Greek, in the indirect trade. But everybody in Newham, Indian and Pakistani people, they knew that Bricklane was a Bengali area. Even though it wasn't predominantly Bengali, but this is the only place where you used to see a lot of Bengalis. You didn't see anywhere else, right? So I would come here occasionally and feel, get a little bit of Bangladeshi taste, right? And I used to bring my friends. There used to be some restaurants in Hanbury Street, Miraj Cafe, and other restaurants. We would come and eat sometimes. And occasionally I also came to watch film at Nas Cinema. One day I also came and saw General Usmani giving a talk at Nas Cinema. Okay, so that's kind of my involvement early involvement with Bricklane, and because it's a Bangladeshi area, and you see a lot of Bangladeshis, so from the very beginning, a kind of love, developed for the area. Then I had other kind of love for other areas because I had relationship with many other parts of London. But this was a special love to do with Bangladesh, and Bangladeshi people. This felt like capital of Bangladesh in this country, right? No other place was like Bricklane. But Bricklane obviously had a history. What we found through our work recently, because I've been involved in a lot of research, is that most people associate Bangladeshi links with this area, East London and Bricklane, from Bangladeshi seamen's involvement with the British Merchant Navy, the joining, coming, jumping of ships, and so on. Especially between the two world wars and after Second World War, when more people came. But from our research, we know that this place, Bricklane area, surrounding area, Liverpool Street, and the Docklands area, Commercial Road, has long historical links, with Bengal. I just give you some example. From around 1660s, East India Company increasingly bought their textiles, from Bengal. Although originally they went to Gujarat, to buy Indian textile to exchange for Indonesian spices. But from 1660s onward, Bengal became more and more important because in Bengal they could find a large varieties of textiles. I read a recent a book, right, where the author provides names of 46, more than 40 different types of textile that East India Company imported from Bengal alone. This is not an exhaustive list, but this list comes quite often in the East India Company's records. From 1725, around that time, until 1760, just after Battle of Plassey, 1757, East India Company imports from the whole of Asia. Bengal was the biggest. In some years, out of the total East India Company's imports from Asia, that include China, Japan, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, more than 70% came from Bengal alone. And they consisted mainly of textiles, raw silk, and also saltpeter. Saltpeter is the ingredient for gunpowder. That strictly wasn't from Bengal. It was from Bihar, but it came through Bengal and boarded East India Company ships, in Calcutta and places like that. But they also imported turmeric from Bengal. I don't know what use they made of turmeric here. So goods from Bengal, the hard work of Bengal villagers, the products of their hard work, beautiful textile that they made, came here and passed through a lot of these streets, and they were sold off in auctions not very far from here. They were kept in warehouse near Petticoat Lane. So this area has long history with Bengal. Out of the total textile imports from Bengal, about 20-25% were raw silk. Now, I haven't undertaken any research to find out whether any of the Bengal raw silk ended up here, or used by Huguenot silk weavers, that can be discovered if somebody went and did some research or undertook some PhD studies, looked through the records of containing British Library, East India Company records. So that's then obviously the East India Company planted tea in Assam first, then Sylhet from 1850s, Assam from 1830s. Tea from Assam started to come to this country in late 1830s, and obviously later on from Sylhet. So then that link, so there is this link with Bengal from 1830s, 40s, 50s, tea link. Then obviously the seamen, link. And the other link is that from from around 1690, the East India Company was given by the Mughals 3 villages that became known as Calcutta, right? And the Mughals came to the villages after the East India Company tried to take over Chittagong, conquer part of Bengal. But then the Mughals were too strong, and the Mughals sort of kicked them out, but then allowed them to come establish because trade was very beneficial to the Mughals as well. So that's where Calcutta grew, right? Calcutta is Bengal. And later on, after Battle of Plassey, Calcutta became the capital of British, expanding British control over India, and it remained capital until around 1905 when it was moved to Delhi, right? So you have all this connection with Bengal, deep connection to Bengal, which very few people are aware of. And I think just to talk about Banglatown and my sort of involvement, right, in Bricklane in terms of development and regeneration. Now my role is like very small, and it was only for a small period. Back in 1989, I was offered a job, 3 months contract to undertake some economic research, because there was a process here. An organization was set up called Community Development Group, supported by Spitalfield Task Force and business in the community, to produce a community plan for the Bishopsgate Goodsyard and Truman Brewery,
yeah.
right? Together it was 27 acres, 17 acre Bishopsgate Goodsyard and Truman's Brewery 10 acres, because Truman's Brewery that time announced that they wanted to move out their production and they want to redevelop this site for community benefit. Even the chairman came to talk to the community, say how he wants to leave a legacy, how he wants this to work for the community. So while I was working on this research project, I became very excited, about the potentials for regeneration and how, and also this was deliberately made to be a Bangladeshi-led initiative, right? So I worked on the community plan for 3 months.
So I'm going to just explain to the viewers. So obviously in the 1980s, a lot of manufacturing declined. So just throughout the country, a lot of factories closed. Bricklane and the surrounding area was a centre for manufacturing, especially in what they call the leather trade and the garment trade, etc. So obviously you had an economic decline. The brewery left, etc. So as you had Bishopsgate Goodsyard, so there was a scheme for a community plan. That Ahmedullah was involved in it. Interesting enough, around about the same time, the discussion about the gate and the Banglatown as a thing. So after
the gate idea wasn't discussed that time, but
after that, so your plan came in about 1990, I think, etc.
No, what I would say is that I worked on the project, from August '89 for 3 months, but then my contract finished, but I was still kind of there, interested in how the thing was unfolding, right?
So the reason why I'm interested in that is, they try to pursue a different. So at the moment, development or regeneration here is not led by the people who live here. It's led by people with deep pockets, for example, developers or landowners. There was an attempt for the local community to actually develop the space around them. And while there'll be, I've actually got a copy of that. So I'll put a picture up of the plan that was developed. And then, so it's an interesting approach to regeneration, and I think the culmination, obviously that didn't come through, but the culmination of this kind of approach to regeneration, you could say symbolically, was the naming of Banglatown, of the area, and also you had this gate come about. So it was an approach to regeneration, and now we have a different approach to regeneration, it seems, here, where it's led by property developers, etc. So when I had the interview with Professor Claire Alexander, LSE, London School of Economics, Cities Research Department did this map where they showed that the investment in the area is being led by property developers. So all around Brick Lane there's massive investments, but in this area there isn't. And it's kind of like letting the area go down. Do you want to talk about your experience, your observations about the gate and the naming of Banglatan and what people's responses were to that?
Well, what I would say is that first I want to say that the idea that that initiative should be Bangladeshi led, it came from the Spitalfield Task Force. This was a government initiative. Mr. Thatcher promised, when she won the election in 1987, that she was going to turn her attention to inner city regeneration.
Yeah.
Because at that time there was a lot of unemployment, a lot of industries were being closed down, and for the first time in this area, Bangladeshis started to become unemployed in a large number, because before then nearly every Bangladeshi was employed in the rec trade and some in the restaurant trade, right? So the initiative was led by the task force, and they helped develop leadership, within the Bangladeshi community, with a view to them taking over and leading the community, so the community can engage with the local authorities and other powers, right, to fight for their rights and so on, right? This is like my understanding of what happened. While I was working on this project for 3 months, I heard the term Banglatan being mentioned, and different people claimed that they were the originators, of the term, of the phrase, Banglatan. And I believe the Banglatan concept was first initiated during early 80s by some people, but I have no knowledge of. I heard it first time in 1989. But then nobody had a kind of clue or clear concept of what a Banglatan should be. But I heard discussion, and sometimes I contributed, participated. But one of my view was that we shouldn't have the name Banglatan, because then we'll be copying Chinatown. And Chinese have a unique history with this, the idea of a Chinatown. And if we borrow and copy, I didn't think it would work personally, right? But for some reason, the name Banglatan caught the imagination of most Bangladeshi people here, so that's all kind of I know. And subsequently, I wasn't involved, or I didn't know what was going on. And many years later, I heard that a Banglatan, they have established Banglatan. There's a gate and some furniture. And when I came to have a look, I was really disappointed, because the gate and the lamp post, they didn't seem to be especially attractive or high quality, and they didn't seem to symbolize anything quintessential, with Bangladesh or Bengali culture, Bengali art, Bengali craft. So I was a bit disappointed, and it didn't really look that quality. And then subsequently, right, there was no attempt to develop it or enhance it, consolidate it. I don't know why, right? But then later on, things started to kind of go in the reverse direction. The Bengalis are moving out of this area because of high rain and rates, whatever. But then a lot of Bengalis were kind of lamenting that this is what's happening, because Death of Bricklane was there forever.
Well, it's kind of interesting that we had the symbol, but it seems that the infrastructure or the support needed to sustain the symbol. So you can have a symbol, but you need to sustain it. So the classic example is you've got the famous Brick Lane sign, and then you've got in Bengali Brick Lane. But if you walk around, and I'll put the picture up in the video, it's neglected. You go anywhere in Tower Hamlets, none of the road signs, I guarantee you, look like that. you go walk around Bricklane, especially the signs with Bangla writing on it. It's like it's from the Blitz. You know, there's rust growing. It has been painted. No one thought about the sign, so it just shows that you can have the symbol, but if you don't sustain it, the whole thing deteriorates. And it's kind of like that road sign not being looked after or replaced. It's kind of like an analogy for Bricklane as it is. So when we were talking earlier, Dr. Ahmedullah, you were talking about the music shops and the bookshops, etc. They're no longer there. We just spoke to a restaurant owner who said that there were so many restaurants. Now the restaurants are going down. So it just seems like it's a symbol, but it's declining. There isn't that public investment, etc. But you said that people are lamenting this is happening. Should we let it happen? Is it part, or should we just stand and fight the last battle of Bricklane? What's your feeling? Because
what I would say is that this, you know, when this is my understanding, right? You know, when people felt strongly that there should be Bangla Town here and the name should be Bangla Town, but you know, there wasn't, you know, brainstorming session. As far as I know, there hasn't been, you know, real good quality sustained discussion what Bangla Town could look like and how it could be sustained, and also whether the location Bricklane, the context, historical and the geographical context would enable a flourishing Bangla Town to sort of you know, be established and sustained, right? Because something to sustain, something to do well, you need the locational advantage, you know, the area to be a location which provides, you know, more advantage than disadvantage. And everything, in order to work, they have to be economically viable, right? And you need a lot of you know, creative minds, you know, to have an input into how to make an area attractive, but at the same time will be economically viable. If there's no economic viability, then nothing can sustain it. It will just go, right? So I will just give you some example. You know, when you had communism in Eastern Europe, so they used to build a lot of factories in different places without thinking whether those locations could be you know, sustainable, right? In terms of other resources, skills of the people, and transport potentials, right? And so on. So they just built, you know, with their big planning, but it didn't work out because. So what I was trying to say is that you have to really think how something would be sustainable economically.
So it's not just defending the symbol, but also setting up the infrastructure and the plan to sustain the defense of that symbol. That's it.
But also understanding how something could be economically viable and thriving, right? And also the other thing is, if you don't have creative people involved to help generate the interest, right, and something to have high aesthetic, you know, value, and people to talk about, right? Like I remember people going to Chinatown. They will talk about, oh, we're going to Chinatown. It was something special, you know, to go to Chinatown. I don't think anybody would say, let's go to Bangla Town, it's something special, right? If you come to here, you should say, go to curry restaurants, right? You see restaurants in Whitechapel, you see restaurants in Upton Park. There's nothing unique Bangla Town about this place, right? So my view is that, and also, you know, you have the Kavi Nazrul Center. Kavi Nazrul Center could have been a hub of Bangla Town, right? It could house some beautiful galleries, right? Yeah? A small museum, you know, resource center where people could come and get information about Bengal, Bangladesh, and about, you know, Bengali in history in this area. So you could have had all those things, but it didn't kind of happen. You need an institution, you need something to drive and, you know, get people's mind to focus on how you can continuously improve, you know, this like Bangladeshi presence here. right? And showcase, the quality and the beauty of our food, our arts, our crafts, our poetry, our everything. But that kind of didn't happen. So, but we are lamenting, and also there are other people who say, why should you have Bangla town here? This place is a historical place for the Jewish president, Huguenots, and also why should you have Bangla town here, right? But what I would say is that you can have a Bangla quarter here or a Bangla presence here because this area has nearly 400 years links with our country, right? And our country made so much contribution to this country, right? In terms of dress, fashion, earlier time, then tea, and our seamen, who jump ships and who worked in the British Merchant Navy, they made a lot of contribution to this society. And then subsequently, in the textile industry, the women worked at home, men worked in the factories, and then all the restaurants, the food that they provided. And this Bricklane had bookshops, record shops, and many other beautiful items, that products of Bangladesh. But they also gone from here. In terms of, even though I personally was against the name of Bangla town, but I wasn't against the concept of establishing some kind of Bangla quarter or Bangla kind of presence.
I think it's important in terms of the history because there's a reluctance to record that history or acknowledge it, even in the Tower Hamlets Council's marketing of the area. But it's not. I think you can always buck the market, and I want to give the example of when people came up with the London Living Wage or Citizens UK. They went to HSBC Bank and they said, "Why are you paying the cleaners money that they can't live on?" And they said, "That's a market rate. Do you expect us to go above the market rate? You can't buck the market." Lo and behold, after a campaign, HSBC were the first ones in Canary Wharf to adopt a living wage for their cleaners. Now it's a London thing. So you can buck the market if you have a political will. And the issue is, do we have the political will to defend and sustain and enhance the symbol of Bricklane, Bangla Town, not just say 70 years of history, but 300 years of history, because the relationship...
No, nearly 400 years.
400 East India Company importing Bengali textiles through the ages. Obviously you had Bengali workers coming in, and then it's that same textile industry after the war. Instead of importing textiles, the demand was labour. So again, Bengali exported labour here. So it's that continuation. So do we defend it? I think we can. Where there's a will, there's a way. I know there's been so many battles of Bricklane. I think it's worth having one more.
What I would say is that, as I was saying earlier on, I didn't like the idea of Bangla Town, the name especially, right? But it was established, by the efforts of a lot of people, and I respect them immensely. But now we have to protect, we have to fight to preserve this, right? But then we cannot just political will is important, because political will help focus mind to make the whole thing creatively and economically sustainable. But then when we fight for it, we have to come up with workable ideas, right? And I would suggest, right, that Gobi Nazrul Center could be the hub of this renewed effort.
Headquarters for the Battle of Bricklane.
And then it will be the headquarters of the
Battle for Bricklane.
Bangla Town or Bangla Quarter or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But no, we must fight, but we fight with ideas and good proposals, right? And imaginative solutions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Ahmedullah, for joining me for another Voice of Tower Hamlets. All the links are with the description, including the link at the end to Professor Claire Alexander's interview on the Death of Bricklane. So this is part 2. I'm quite hopeful now. I think we can do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. But thank you for watching and take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Walaikum salam.
Hey.